One of the great marketing pieces I've ever seen, and it was so effective, people used it against the UFC. Andrei Arlovsky. This marketing campaign, this is when the UFC started to be called a machine for the first time. And it was just a very interesting piece, psychologically speaking, because the year was 2005. And as well documented, the UFC was in the hole $40 million. And Lorenzo had made the decision, pull the plug, I'm out. He sat on that for a while. He made it fun. He called back and said, hold on, a little bit more. So I only say that because in 2005, it was the same year that it almost all ended. It was the same year that we all band together, and it was such a struggle. And we're having a band for acceptance, and it's literally a fight. It's a narrative. It's a dialogue. It's a battle at all times. And as soon as it turned that corner, right? Ultimate Fighter season finale, Forrest versus Bonner, people turned on it. Our own people, and they started saying this, the machine of the UFC. Now, let me just explain to you what had happened in that time. If you were going to do a pay-per-view back then, and there was 6 events a year, 6 UFCs, there was 5 Pride Fighting Championship. Strike Force was not yet a name. Bellator was not yet a name. Elite XC that you might have heard was not yet a name. So you had 6 UFC events, and you had 5 Pride Fighting Championship events. So you had something to watch almost every month, and that was a real treat. Before Pride came, it was just the UFC, and you had that 5 to 6 events a year. And it was a real challenge to find out when those events were. You could get it, and it was something called the internet that had it. But to get onto the internet, do you guys remember this? Remember that? Just to get on the internet? People didn't have it. They didn't have an internet in their pocket at all times. Believe it or not, there was a time when the internet didn't even exist, and then even when it did exist, it was pretty sparse. If you could get to it, there was places you could go that would let you know when DirecTV was going to show something called the UFC. And if you were going to do a pay-per-view, for sure, we didn't know the opponent yet, but it was going to alternate back and forth. Tito Ortiz was going to be your main event, or Randy Couture was going to be your main event. And it had to be that way, or your doors were not going to be open. It was really important, and Tito got in something. He got in something. I had WFA, if you guys remember this time, and Randy retired. And they did it what seemed to be back to back. You know, it feels to me like it was a month apart. So your 2 main event, they're gone. What are you going to do? There was a guy, and he was a bit of a character. He was a bit mysterious. Good looking son of a bitch. Young guy, Belarusian, and a gimmick back then was very, very hard to find. Phil Baroni had one of the great gimmicks up until that point, which was to simply wear a robe like boxers used to wear and hire a couple of Bettys to walk to the ring with you. But it was huge. I mean, it was a huge, huge deal that Phil did that. It was a piece of entertainment. And I tell you that because what all Andre had is he had a mouthpiece that had fangs on it. That's it. But that was more than anybody else had. So he was good looking. He was mysterious. I've got to tell you, I would never bag on Andre. This is meant to really serve and compliment Andre. But at that time in 2005, he had an 8-4 record. So when Randy gone and Tito's gone, the UFC, who needed a character, you have to have a face. Right? Once you're a sport and you're proven, you can start to get away with some other things. The NFL, by example, I mean, you know, the NBA, by example, you don't have to have that. Really important when you're first coming out. And put everything behind Andre. And he was nicknamed the Pitbull, so they had professional photos done. And he's in this suit, which he looked great in, and he's got pit bulls with him. They got collars on. He said, I remember this photo from 2005. He's at his Range Rover. And somebody probably rented him for the shoot. He's in this fantastic suit, which somebody else bought him and had tailored for the shoot. He's got these pit bulls with him. He's calling himself the pit bull. We didn't know anything else. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So these pictures circulate, and all of a sudden, he fills the void. I debuted in the UFC. Andrei Arlovski was the main event, fighting for a world championship versus Paul Buntello. And place was sold out. Really hard to do. When Tito and Randy left, oh, this was a blow. And I remember people started turning on the machine, oh, the marketing machine. Look at what they've done. Look how they built Andre. But that's true. It was that effective. And the people shifted and they gravitated. Andre was fun to watch. He had this footwork that for a heavyweight, it simply didn't exist. And I will tell you, Andre has had those difficult fights, those ones that cut your career short. Right? You get in there with Tim Sylvia, your life is likely to be different afterwards. It's going to change you. It's going to change you. And, you get in there with Rico Rodriguez, which Andre had done before he was even champion, just by example. But those guys are going to change you. He fought them all. Andre fought them all. He fought them for 3 rounds. He fought them for 5 rounds. He fought them on short notice. He went over to Affliction and fought Fedor, who used to be Andre's training partner, or vice versa, I should say. Fedor was like the face of the gym, and Andre was this young face coming in. Andre actually left the gym because he knew he would always be in the shadow of Fedor. And the next thing you know, they're fighting each other. It was first a crazy purse. At that time, I think he got like 800,000. But it was numbers, we had never even seen that in MMA. It's a really exciting thing. Another sold-out arena. I'm just sharing with you. He had some really interesting memories. And he never turned to the braggadocious side. He was never cocky. He was never arrogant. He was never a trash talker. I think some of that might have helped him, and not necessarily to be brash. He could have been kind and calm, but I think he could have talked a little bit more. I think Andre's got a little bit of shyness to him, which probably surprises you. I've met him a couple of times, and I remember being excited to meet him. The first time I met him was backstage at an event, and Matt Lindland knew him. I was with Matt, and Matt and him are talking. I'm like, come on, Matt, introduce me, bring me into this. And Matt finally goes, oh, hey, Andre, you know Chael, don't you? He's like, hey, Chael, son, I'm a big fan. It was one of these things. But he didn't say much back. Like, he didn't know. He didn't know that meeting him was a cool thing. He didn't know that he was looked at by the boys differently. He just kind of was this humble and shy guy. He fought over the weekend. He and I are the same age. And whether that means we're a year apart, he's a year older, he's a year younger, it's the same thing. If we went to high school, we'd have been in the hallways together at some point. And he's still out there competing. I think that's coming to an end. I think that light is dimming. But I would love to hear from him. And as I said, he's a quiet guy. People don't know a lot about him. Even when he did those photo shoots with the rented car and the beautiful suit and the dogs, I don't even know if those were his dogs. They may well have been his dogs, and he loves it. Not at all my point. My point is that's how little we know about him. He got a mouthpiece that had fangs on it. And that was a gimmick before anyone else had one. And he went from undercard to main event. And he stayed there. He was very, very sought after. And I have to guess some of the rest. I have to guess he's a very pleasant guy. I have to guess that he's a pleasure to work with. I have to guess that he's organized, that he answers his phone. I have to guess. There's only certain ways that you can stick around in an organization like this. I mean, people have got to like you, and people must like Andre Arlovski. And I thought for a period of time that he was an athlete, not a fighter. And I think it's very important that you know which one you are, that you can identify. Am I athletic? Am I going to do this on grit? But with Andre, it seems like it's changed. I mean, that footwork and that speed and the way he would move around, but he's in there at 46 years old. He's training for these guys. He's fighting these guys, take on absolutely anybody. keeping his mouth shut, I don't know if that's a great idea, but he's got me curious. I would like to know more about who he is. And at a minimum, I think we can all as a community share in the idea of just saying, Andre, great job.